Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out here. This is kind of like the Monty Python, and now for something completely different. We've been getting a lot of AI here, so this will be kind of like a sorbet between your AI courses here, if you will. As the write-up said, this session is going to explore, the possibly combining emojis with text programming languages. And I'm not necessarily married to emoji. I'm basically talking about just symbols in general. And, we use emojis, we use images throughout all of our communications, right? But the thing that kind of struck me as unusual is, we really don't see that work its way into programming languages. You might see it into some constant stuff. You might put out some alerts that have an emoji in them or something like that. But even though, we use it in Slack, we use it in Teams, we use it in email, we use it, to ubiquitous on phones, for whatever reason, it didn't get there. So what got me into this, I'll get into in a second, but, I had a specific use case for, possibly a new Unicode kind of symbol or an emoji kind of thing. And, it's just kind of running that past a programming community. I got some feedback that was kind of unusual to me, and I just got me kind of going down one of these wormholes where you kind of explore, well, why is there resistance to this? Is there a technological reason for it, or does it speak to, maybe some bigger issues within the programming world as far as, what we consider appropriate programming? I think, in the Python world, we'd say, is this Pythonic or not? But, the same thing is prevalent in other programming languages. And just curious about why certain features are okay in one language, but not in another one. And even it's a thing that changes over time, right? What was Pythonic 3 years ago isn't Pythonic today, and vice versa. So with that introduction, let me go ahead. One other thing, I'm not going to be showing too much code. There'll be some code snippets here, but if you take a look at it later and you say, well, oh, why is he programming like this? It could be lack of knowledge. I'm still kind of new to the Python world. I'm kind of moving over from the SAS world here. And it's an interesting trip, but I know I've learned a lot, but I'm also know I have a lot more to learn, so. Okay, so just what we're going to go over here. Don't worry too much about this, but, I just want to tell you what prompted this idea, just exploring why we might want to use pictures in our code, what that might look like specifically within Python, and just say, even if we do this, it's like trying to teach an elephant to dance, that's neat, but how useful is this? And then at the end, I just wanted to try to snicker test what I was looking at, just see what this might look like. So I just kind of constructed a rudimentary emoji-to-text preprocessor. So it's nothing, I didn't dive into the compiler world or anything like that. So it's, it's nothing that's production ready, but just to get a feeling for how you might be able to integrate this stuff, particularly into the Python notebook world. And, after that, I'd be interested if you all have thoughts on this stuff or questions, we'll take those. Okay, I thought I'd steal the famous George Bernard Shaw thing here. Not quite as noble as the Kennedys or something here, but, it's kind of an odd idea here, but I'll try to explain the method to my madness. Okay, so I talked earlier about something prompted me specifically to look into this, and I'll go through that real quickly. If you haven't used SAS, that's an example of some Copilot generated SAS code on the left, just a bunch of series of steps that just do different types of analyses, kind of akin to what you would do with different packages in the Python world. And one thing that was just driving me nuts, if you work with certain people, a run statement, SAS by default doesn't run things until, if you submit the whole stream of things, it'll run them automatically. But if you're doing testing, people insert these little run steps. It's kind of equivalent to hitting Control Enter in Python. And sometimes I would see, a 400-line SAS program, and 100 of these lines would just be run statements, which would just drive me nuts. And I thought, well, this is silly. Why instead of ending each of these little procedures with a semicolon, the word run, and a semicolon, why don't we just have a composite character that just is a semicolon with the run statement incorporated in it? So it seemed like something that would just take away something that was driving me nuts, but allow people to continue to use it if they want to. So I thought, I tried to snicker test my idea. SAS has a big programming community, very friendly, stuff like that. So I thought I'd put the question out there, and just made this post. And, usually if I post something out there, I'd be lucky if I got maybe 50 or 100 views. So this one, it definitely hit a nerve with some people. So like over 3,000 views. And, just posed, what do people think about this? And, I kind of sat back and waited for, the accolades. People say, oh, you're a genius. And, but I got something different. Like I said, it's normally a friendly community. And, all the responses were unilaterally negative. And, the thing that just bothered me a little bit was, okay, nobody likes this, but nobody's saying why they don't like it. Just that it's cringeworthy, bad idea, that kind of stuff. I was looking for something beyond that. So, and, you see the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. It was just trying to figure out why were people reacted so vigorously against the idea of using symbols in our programming languages. We use it in all of our displays and stuff like that, but why are we reluctant to adopt that ourselves? Okay, and obviously symbols are a pretty well time-tested concept, since prehistoric days. It's something we employ for kids. You have a baby, one of the first things they're going to do when they're young or a toddler, you're going to give them the nice picture book that's going to associate words with pictures. They get a little older. There's Highlights magazine, which I'll have an example on another page, but just combines the words with the pictures, kind of helps kids learning how to read. And, there's an example of that, like in the lower right-hand corner. It's a cute way, and kids kind of look forward to that. I'm not sure what they use now with the web, so I think the magazines are kind of a thing of the past. But, of course, it's and symbols are just so ubiquitous, ever since they came out with the iPhone in 2008 or whatever that was. People just use it so matter-of-factly. And again, why don't we see it used in programming languages? Go back even further into the 70s with the whole I Love New York campaign there with the precursor of the heart emoji. And even to the Macintosh days when that first came out, a bunch of cute icons and fonts developed by Susan Kerr with Steve Jobs. And again, this was something, before that happened, people would say, why would we want something different than MS-DOS, And sometimes, as Steve Jobs said, sometimes you have to show people what they want, because they're going to be reluctant if you just throw it out there as an idea. The stuff that she has on the right side is just a type font that was developed. So I think, of course, things are a little more sophisticated today. You might see something like this in Font Awesome package, that kind of thing, which is kind of like a prettier version of emojis, if you will. So, maybe part of the problem is we haven't had our Susan Kerr come to the programming world to just, show us some stuff that we can't live without. So, not that you're going to see something like that with what I came up with, but, somebody that's a graphic artist or something like that, or a human factors person, might be able to come up with something real good. Okay, and even going back further, this is going back to the APL language. And this was back in the early 60s, and of course I can see reasons why that didn't get adopted, because back then you had to actually, if you wanted symbols, you kind of had to do it in hardware, both with the special keyboard, or even before that, they actually had to do it in metal with the Selectric type heads. Okay, so that original post I made in like 2022, and I was going to a regional conference for SAS user group conference earlier this year. I thought maybe I'll revisit this concept, and not just look for my one character, but also just kind of address the larger issue of why don't we incorporate the symbols throughout the language. So, and again, as far as what that might look like, I thought it'd be looking a little bit like this Highlights magazine for kids, the kind of stuff where they incorporate. Here they're showing both, but sometimes they just show the images in these stories that children used to love, at least when mine were smaller. Okay, and I'll get to the Python in a second, but this is just the initial one for the SAS thing, so, a little bit different if then else structure than the Python world, but nothing that different. And, it looks kind of weird at first take. Here I just kind of selected some emojis that you might want to pick out that would be associated with keywords or statements in SAS. And, the thinking emoji for if, the checklist, positive for the then side of the if statement, the else statement, the negative, the X, and then you don't have this in Python since you've got that slicer notation, but in the SAS, like a lot of languages, they have a substring function. So the scissors there, and you look at it, it looks a little odd, and then you think about it and you wonder, well, is it odd because I'm just seeing this for the first time? Because I'm thinking if I was someone new to programming or a child looking at programming, the scissors would look more intuitive to me than a substring, right? So that's a feeling. So, here's the side-by-side comparison of a simple SAS program, with some emojis that I selected. I've got the if statement two different ways, with the thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing. And, also using it for, different functions here for the date, for the time. For printers, obviously printers are a thing. And there's my emoji for the run statement there.
I like that.
Yeah. Okay, and then, just like with Python, SAS has embedded SQL too. So figured I might as well tackle SQL at the same time. And again, if you could insert pictures as well, that would be good. I didn't find a real easy way to do. I didn't find many editors where I could kind of parse out the pictures as well as I could with emojis. So that's why I stuck to here. But like I said, if you could have a wider number of pictures to choose from, you could get things that look a little bit better. So here I just, chose the shopping cart for select, and, it's followed by the variables you want to toss into the shopping cart. Just some of them are just kind of little things, but, the one character emojis instead of from, and the order by, and descending. And again, I think it looks a little odd at first glance, if you're used to staring at tens of thousands of lines of SQL. But it kind of makes sense a little bit. And I think, again, if you were new to programming, it wouldn't look quite as strange. So again, what might this look like in a bigger program? You've got the link for the joins, that kind of stuff. Okay, and then on the Python here, and this, I probably didn't have some good choices here with some of the stuff here, but the same kind of if thing. Replace the date time by the combination of those two icons there. And, obviously the print is kind of no-brain with the printer. And again, kind of a side-by-side one here. At the top of the page, it's kind of cute for the packages, with pandas and DuckDB, and I've got Plotly. I just chose those symbols for that. Nothing else much new here. Obviously, there's no then in the Python world. And yeah, that's it. Again, you've got the SQL in the Python world here. Just because I don't have a Snowflake access or something at home, I just chose DuckDB to illustrate it for my testing. And the same kind of thing. You could just go ahead and pick up similar things. The one new thing here is too, you could also equate things with data set names, variable names, things like that with the cars. And again, here's what the whole thing might look like. So it's not quite as much heavy print on the page, with the one on the right. So whether I made the right choices here, I'm sure a graphic artist would be horrified, but just trying to get the point across here. Okay, so again, you might say, okay, well, this is great, it looks really cute, but, is there any point to doing this? Are there any possible benefits of this? So just going to a couple of these things here. So, people like keyboard shortcuts, they like code snippets, that kind of stuff. They save you a lot of typing, right? You can go ahead and just kind of map at the top left corner here. We've got something that you might have in VS Code. But it's kind of obtuse, with the notation and things like that. And what this thing buys you is, if you start typing INS line, it'll go ahead and it'll insert a line into your code, and that's great. But the other side of the coin too is once you do that, instead of having an abbreviation, a shortcut abbreviation, you're going to get everything in your code expanded out, and that's what you're going to be maintaining. And that's kind of an issue, right, with the AI stuff. It's great that you type in a terse prompt, but then you might get back a lot of code, and what are you going to be maintaining in the future here? You're not going to be maintaining that original prompt in a lot of cases. You're going to be maintaining that generated code, and that's, if you can keep what the code you're maintaining smaller, there's benefits to that. So here's like an example at the lower left, which I would suggest for like with the symbols. Here's a symbol for, the plug, using it for like connecting to Snowflake, and you can associate that with whatever a standard, maybe your standard production databases and your account on AWS. And then when you're in your code, all you have to do is include that plug when you're connecting instead of having the lines of code over and over again. Okay, the other thing, we all know how people like syntax highlighting, right? So, here, I've got an example from documentation, upper left-hand corner. Just they use different font weights, different colors to try to give some insight into what different things are. You'll also see people trying to employ things like Hungarian notation, that kind of stuff, just to give a cue as to what type of data you're dealing with. So one of the things that you do, if you use the emoji for that stuff, as you can see on those prior pages, you kind of see it kind of pops up and gives you some insight into things. You can see your references to DuckDB, just look for the pictures of the ducks, right? Okay, and then the last thing is, sometimes we forget that not everybody is an expert in programming languages and, the theory behind all this stuff. So, you do have an audience of newcomers, be it kids or people that are just learning programming. And it's the kind of thing that might make things a little more enticing. One of the things that people are struggling with right now is trying to get people, they have come up with things like Scratch in the upper right-hand corner there, which I guess was birthed in this town. And, which is cute, but then they worry about, how do you get kids? And you say, okay, well, this was great, but, here's where the real action is, down in the bottom right-hand corner. That's quite a transition to them. And, again, this is just kind of seat of the pants speculation on my part, but I think that kids might find, a way to kind of decorate that thing with the icons a little more appealing than, the black screen down at the bottom. So it's one of those things that's just a little intuitive at this point, but you see a lot of people in the K-12 education space, some college professors and stuff like that, and they're all kind of dabbling with ways to make things easier. I think there's a woman, Feline Hermans, I might be getting her name wrong, but she's got some more playful ways to introduce people to Python. She kind of, introduces them. You don't have to worry about the quotes at first. So, which confuses a lot of kids when they start programming. And you can do the same thing here. Instead of quotes, you might just want to have the icon for text or something like that, to surround things. Okay, with all that in mind, I just wanted to try to see how you might be able to affect something like this and just see if I could do something within Python. Just to go ahead and take the code that has emojis in it, mixed in with the text and translate it into pure text, which is what Python's going to need, and just see how much work might be there. And, so it was, just to kind of see what kind of challenges there might be and just see what justifiable explanations there might be for not trying to adapt this stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of other considerations too, but just to see if it was kind of feasible here. So again, I didn't try to get into anything like abstract syntax trees or something like this. I kept it very simple here. And as far as the implementation environment, I used VS Code with the Jupyter extension, and a feature that I was unaware of up to this time, an IPython input transformer, which I guess is what's behind some of the, when you use magics and things like that, it just gives you access to what's in the cell, and then you can manipulate what's in there and go ahead and generate whatever you want sent to Python. I think the other example they use for that is, when you use an exclamation point to execute an operating system command. Something I read said that that's how that's implemented as well. So I thought I'd try using that. We'll see that in the next page. But one of the first things is, you think at first, okay, well, this should just be a simple, text replacement, because logically that's all it is. You want to take a list of emojis and just translate them to what the mapped text is. But it turns out it's not quite that simple, because when you get into the emoji world, here we've got the person running facing right, which surprisingly is more complicated than person running facing left. So it's actually a composite of several emojis with special connector codes in between it. So it's actually the person running left combined with, the symbol for male gender combined with the right arrow. And so you've got, instead of in the ASCII world where you have, one character, one byte, or the Unicode, the first thing you see there, which is, just a little bit more, you've got this composite character. So this one character is actually 22 bytes of storage. Okay, and this is just, just kind of illustrates that point. It's kind of a variable length encoding thing here, and probably only going to get more complicated when you add in, like skin tones, gender, that kind of stuff. There's a whole bunch of things there. So this might be kind of a practical thing, that might be a kind of a roadblock. As a matter of fact, I've even seen, I was kind of mortified when I had my presentation PowerPoint here. It looks fine here. If I put it out on, PowerPoint Web has a bug, and it actually displays the person running right as the person running left. So, so if anybody from Microsoft here, again, I use this as my technical support as well. Okay, so I thought, well, I had read Python has emoji support, so I thought, okay, I'm all set here. I ran into kind of the same thing with SAS, even a step further back, that it has one set of functions for normal ASCII characters, another one for kanji characters, which is like the single Unicode characters. But both Python and SAS, neither of them has native support for the more complicated characters or emojis. So, which is fine. The good news is on the Python side, you've got all these wealth of Python packages to fill in the gaps. So, you can use a Python package, I don't know, regex, however you pronounce it. You can use that. That'll help you identify and extract emojis, and it'll also give you the position where things are in as well. It supports those complicated emoji clusters. We'll take a quick look here. This is just the SAS example, but it kind of shows how, it'll take simple text, an if then else, and it'll just map it all out for you and you can create a whatever's convenient data structure for you if you want to have it in a data frame, whatever, which is what I did here. You can have everything just mapped out, and then once you have it mapped out, you can go ahead and just kind of you can just go ahead and take those and just map them over to the text that's involved. So here's what that process is. We're going to take, the input cell from your notebook. We're going to use the IPython transformer to replace things using the regex. And, you come out with the Python code without emojis, and, then Python will be able to run your emoji-free code. Okay, and here's I was thinking, I could get out a nice flow charting tool to do this, but then I thought, well, the children's game of telephone kind of explains just as well what's going on here. We've got the statement upper left-hand corner. We want to go ahead, want to translate that pandas emoji into the word. Similarly for the DuckDB, and then we'll pass it on to Python to execute the text code. So how are we going to do that? We're going to need some kind of a lookup table, right? So, which is what the Python dictionary is going to be handy for. So you can go ahead, I just created like a representative symbols things here for my testing. So, you can pick whatever you want. And I haven't seen this with emojis, but I've seen back in I go back to the IBM mainframe world. So I was kind of astounded to see some stuff back from when I first started my career. It's still in production now, and it looks like a complete hack, where they go ahead and they just map individual special characters, like a plus sign or something, to a to a stream of words. And surprisingly, like I said, it's still being used now, decades and decades later. So it works. It looks very simple and kind of a hack, but it works. So in the real world, it gets a little complicated because you have to kind of maintain some state things like that. Obviously you don't want to be translating. You need some global variables here. And again, this is where my Python's a little weak. There's probably better ways to do this, but you don't want to be translating. You want translation off when you're trying to define a dictionary, right? So it's just some of these little things you have to worry about. And then, here's a complete program here. I just kind of drew lines in there just to show the breakouts of what I was trying to test in those things. So, you have your packages defined, then you're trying to run a little Python code, then try to run a little SQL code, and down at the bottom, just run a little Python chart or Plotly chart. Okay, and we'll see if this goes. This was just to show what's going on. So some of this code you would only want to run once, and you can kind of back this off. You can tweak. I've got to look into this a little bit further. You can tweak some of the options files to go ahead and include this automatically, but the stuff where you're the stuff where you want to do the dictionary, that's just a one-time thing. You can allow people to go ahead and you can subsequently update the dictionary too if you wanted to. That was the thing with the IBM thing too. Sometimes you want to, and you see it in macro languages too, that sometimes you want to add to the macros, sometimes you want to delete from the macros. Same things here with the emoji list. So you can do that just by the native dictionary stuff. Oops. Yeah, and it's just a recording here just to show that it actually runs and works. So if you go down to the bottom now, you see that got all the output and things like that just from the emoji laden thing. So after getting all this done, I thought, okay, well, this is great. Before I go to the conference, why don't I just check and see what people think? Kind of like what I did with the SAS community earlier. And so I thought, I'll go out to ChatGPT here. Oh, I said no AI, but there's my AI-generated Sam Altman picture there. So, and I just kind of explained what I was doing here, and I said, just tell me what you think of this. Is this Pythonic? Is this not Pythonic? So, I kind of got the same kind of pushback that I got from the SAS community. So, you see a lot of red X's there. Hacky, unreadable, violates clarity. And again, you kind of go back to the whole thing about the whole programming world where you think about what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. And, who makes these rules and how do we come about with some of these decisions here? So, like I said, the general consensus here was this was not Pythonic. And, it just so happened a couple of days before here, it's like to make me even more nervous about the presentation. I saw an article in the Communications, the ACM, where they're talking about if you want to use AI, some people are saying, well, you shouldn't have any symbols, so you should try to avoid that. Although it was kind of contradictory when I read the article. So, but that's another thing to worry about too. You're not just going to have people pushing on things now. You're going to have AIs pushing about what it wants, and it's one of those things where I hope we don't lose sight of the human side of things here too. That I know some are saying coding's dead. I don't think it will be for a while, but who knows? Could be proven wrong. But I was reminded of this kind of reminded me of an old presentation by Brett Victor back in 2013. And I don't know if anybody's seen this one. It's kind of a famous one on YouTube. But he kind of went back in time and he was kind of lamenting, back then that that we've kind of gone into a world where people were just trying everything. And now the problem is that over time, we've gotten ourselves convinced that we figured everything out. And, his point was, I don't think we've really figured things out. So he was saying, don't let dogma affect your decisions. Just because people say it's right, you're probably not in the finished state there. So, and he said, you could go back to a certain point in time and people would say, when they want to switch from binary to something like Fortran, people were saying, well, no, binary is programming. We don't want this Fortran. That's not programming. And I think we're kind of in that state today. I mean, we're really seeing a disruption here with the AI, right? Is natural language, is that programming? And probably as recently as 5 years ago, people would say, no, it's not. And now they're saying, well, yeah, it's more than programming. So it's programming plus. So things are always changing over time. And I think the key message out of this is just, take his suggestion to heart. Just say, we don't really know what programming is. This probably, what we're seeing today, it's not what was programming was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. In 5 years, 10, 15 years out from now, it's going to be something different. So just be open to changes. Just don't dismiss them out of hand. Okay, and that is all I had to say. So I appreciate you all sitting through here and listening to me. And, if you have any questions now or if you have any thoughts of your own, I'd be interested in hearing them. Yeah.
So first questions, for me, when you use, and this is not, it's about the font completely, so you're using the font where the emojis, it's probably default, when they colorful and they jump at you. Have you tried experimenting with the fonts that the emojis are rendered the same style as the text without the colors? Because they just Unicode endpoints, right? It's up to the font developer to see how they actually rendered. Have you tried any different renderings?
Are you talking about something like Font Awesome, where the fonts are good?
No. When you have your green arrow pointing up, right? Yeah. So because there is a concept, there is Unicode code point that says this is green arrow. I mean arrow pointing up, right?
Yeah.
But the color and the way it's jumps at you, it's all for up to the font developer. So there are fonts out there that basically render the emojis the same style as the text. They would be black and white.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, the exactly emojis. Yeah, we just because it's a function of the font.
Yeah, kind of like if you're in Windows, but you actually have to kind of switch fonts
because
to get.
They don't have to be colorful. They could be any. You can instead of arrow, you can draw the man going.
Yeah, you can map any character to anything else. So that was one thing I thought of exploring, but like I said, I had limited time and limited knowledge to try to do that. I think the UI was a little bit easier for me here, even though it might be a little more limited and not look as good, the emojis.
Yeah.
I could do it all without having to know all these different font families.
Yeah, there is a whole repo out there, and in the GitHub community, it's called Nord Fonts. And they basically it's very easy to get a font and make it be different.
Okay. I saw a project too. There's I think they have an open source plus a commercial thing called Font Awesome, which is kind of interesting.
Font Awesome comes from there. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That looked intriguing, but again, I didn't see an easy way to do this. I also thought about just how you can have pictures embedded too, and then you could kind of design your own things or use photographs and things like that, but. Again, I couldn't really find a text editor that would be easy to parse, that kind of stuff. So, and part of that is probably just my knowledge, but the stuff you're talking about, I mean, that even goes back to back in the old days of, the Atari PC where you could remap your, you could remap all your fonts and design your own characters and things like that. So.
Another suggestion, I mean, I was just checked, there is a proposal to allow Unicode and Python identifiers that started in 2005. And it's still going. The last comment on it, it's 2 months ago. So you may just chime in that and basically get it moving. Because it's exactly what you showed in the slides. It's exactly the
maybe I'll post a link to it and make a comment. Yeah.
I would just
because I kind of went through that with SAS at first. I thought SAS has a full-blown macro processor and things like that, which is I thought I'll just use that and then put it in.
But if you get
rejected the very it didn't like the
But if you get that proposal accepted, like, so somebody will like implement it and.
Right, yeah.
So it's
check that.
basically, there is a whole resistance in the community to, like,
Yeah.
against the Unicode and it's both ways, not like.
Okay, yeah, check that out, thanks.
Check
Yeah,
it out.
go ahead.
So let's just say we're in a future now where this is like fully accepted. We have interpreters, compilers that just like work with this now. What would you expect, like from a programmer's perspective? Like, how would I write this? Like, would this involve like me like hitting that emoji key, like searching for like the emoji to like get the if statement, or like
Yeah,
would it look
yeah,
like
yeah.
Slack where I like hit a colon and just kind of write it? Like, what would the like a programmer experience look like
Yeah,
in a world like this?
What I was using here was just like, it was on Windows, so I was just using the basic, Windows dot, and it calls up the selection list. I have seen some stuff, I'm not aware of, I'm not a Slack user, but, what I'm doing is basically, they're similar thing in Microsoft Teams, but I have seen some stuff, like there's a thing, again, in the kindergarten through 12th grade space for Apple. They have a thing called Swift Playgrounds, and they've made things a little more intuitive, than the Windows selection, that they've got that nice touch interface, and they just make it a little quicker for you to pick those things than you might have within the Windows. But, I agree that is an issue that would have to be tackled, so. And, the other thing is you'd probably want to have like some kind of a standard icon set, for people, but then let them go ahead and extend it. So I'm not as, I'm not as worried, we all kind of do the equivalent in text, right? We define aliases for different packages, and people kind of gravitate towards the same thing just because it just helps people out, but people aren't bound by that. And I'm kind of thinking the same thing here. Anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, I could feel myself resisting it a little bit.
Sure.
But I also, whenever I feel myself doing that, I challenge myself. And so because emojis are fun, and I think it attracts people. And I think when I imagined, I think one of the things where I feel resistance is I wonder about accessibility. I don't know how that shows up in, I don't know I know enough about accessibility to kind of be dangerous. And then, so I don't quite know how that would show up with coding and somebody trying to, but then where I really liked it was the idea of snippets and kind of the idea of personal shortcuts.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like it could be really, really, when I think about me being able to use it, kind of being able to attach my own, and thinking about kind of attracting more people. So I really think there's a lot of potential with it.
Yeah, it's just the devil's in the details. Right?
Yeah. So I like it. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'll have to touch base. I've got a daughter who's like a web designer, and she's really big into the accessibility thing. And I'll have to talk to her and see what kind of stuff they do for that.
And I come from the public sector, so it's just very.
Yeah, very important. Yeah. Yeah, she works for a university, so same thing. So, yeah.
I hate doing this, but I'm going to preface this question by saying I know nothing about languages. I only speak one language. But one thought that I had while you were giving this presentation is there are languages that exist out there that use symbols in their written language, thinking Chinese or hieroglyphics or et cetera. And I don't know what programming looks like in countries that utilize these languages, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was if 1 million people are writing for I in range a number, right? That maybe some of these languages have just a symbol or a set of symbols that solve that problem. And maybe that example is totally off, but does anybody maybe know, or have you done any looking into what programming looks like in countries or cultures that utilize languages that have these symbolic maybe not even alphabets per se, but like
Yeah.
symbolic characters
Yeah, I
that
did
represent
read,
more.
Yeah, I did read some work by, again, I'm probably murdering the pronunciation, but there's a computer science professor, I think in the Netherlands, Fleen Hermans, and I read some of her stuff, and, I actually sent her some email on some things, and she's addressing some of that stuff, where she said one of the things growing up as a child, she said that she was kind of forced to, she's like 8 years old, and she's not just trying to learn programming, but she's learning programming within the context of English, too. So she's focused a lot on trying to localize languages for kids. And, she said there's a lot of complications that even she was unaware of.
And when you say localizing languages, you mean localizing programming languages?
Yeah, so
Okay.
so they could use, whatever notate, like you said, there's going to be special characters for, depending on the different languages. And she said, she was aware of that, but there's even further complications that she didn't think of just because of her own language. She didn't have to worry about, right to left instead of left to right, and Arabic numeral numbers and things like that, and there's all kinds of special rules. So, there's a lot of stuff, just like the accessibility that,
Right.
if problem doesn't affect you, you don't think about the problem, no matter, like, even if it's something, like you said, affects the entire world,
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of things to think about in the programming space, so.
Just to add to that in languages, I was participating recently in discussion, and people were discussing superiority basically of like Latin alphabet-based languages and like languages like Japanese. So somebody said Japanese takes very long time to learn, like you have to be like some second-year college things. But they say it's much easier to cognitively, once you learn it, cognitively comprehend complex documents, because they use essentially emojis for like very abstract, like very common concepts, like run basically, right, or something. But things like spelled out technical terms, or like very specific, they spelled out phonetically essentially, like. And that way, like when you just glance at the page, like you see like the idea, it's basically it rewires your brain and you just get the general gist like immediately, because it's very few like these emojis like or hieroglyphs like spread around. And then you go deeper and then you like parse the phonetic things, like what are details of that. And it's actually, that's what jumped out at me, and maybe if you work on this, basically more concentrate on using emojis for like the abstract things, like run or select,
Yeah.
or if, and keep like identifiers as the text, basically.
Yeah, and they did say that's one of the nice things about emojis is that, depending upon the situation, like you said, it's more of a universal language, that you can have a
Alright.
symbol that's across languages, so.
Yeah,
But-
and another thing, about doing the sort of non-English programming languages, it's only work for Chinese because there is not big enough community of people contribute, like creating content in these languages, like, right?
Yeah.
Because right now you can go to GitHub and get somebody like from Poland like wrote the code, you can actually go cut and paste the code, right?
Yeah,
And if they were writing in Polish, they basically audiences like shrunk to like 10 million people or whatever, like 30 million people, right? So that's why like everybody just programs in English. But it does work for Chinese because now there is a lot of GitHub repo that are Chinese only. Like,
right. Okay, well, thanks again for coming out, and go enjoy another good lunch, I guess.